question comes up. Now, we're going to spend the rest of the evening really talking about reinforcing that absolutely everybody who puts their faith in Jesus can be a disciple. Because no matter what happens, questions come up like, am I truly discipleship material? You know how the enemy is. We were like, well, I think I'm a D1, I'm a level 1, and then the enemy's like, well, no, you're not. No, you're not. Or is it possible for someone like me to be like Jesus? You don't know who I was. You don't know where I've been. You don't know, can I really move to the next level? I don't know that I really can move to the next level. And I love lots of stories in the Bible about disciples, but my favorite has become Timothy. And so I want to talk about that tonight. So in Acts chapter 16, it says that, verse 1, it says, Paul came also to Derbe and to Lystra, and a disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was a Greek, and he was well spoken of by the brethren who were in Lystra and Iconium. And Paul wanted this man to go with him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those parts, and they all knew that his father was a Greek. Now, Paul's on his second missionary journey. Now, if you remember his first missionary journey, that he comes to Lystra, and when he comes to Lystra, Paul's preaching the gospel, and some Jews from Antioch and Iconium, who he had just been there, had their tunics so bound up that they made the 90-mile trip over to Lystra to stir up the Jews so that they would be mad at Paul. And as a result, they stone Paul and drag him outside the city and leave him for dead. Now, I can just envision, here's Paul, he's got disciples, he's got his followers, there are believers around him, here he is laying out on the road, outside the city, they're around him, they're praying. What do you think they're praying? Oh, woe is me. No, they're praying, look, Jesus raise him up. Jesus get him up. They're praying for him to be raised from the dead, and guess what? Paul gets up. He gets up, dusts himself off, and goes back into town. And it says the next day that he went on to the next city. What a powerful picture this is. And so now Paul has come back to Lystra on his second missionary journey, and there was a believer in town, and his name was Timothy. And it says that his mother was a Jewish believer, that his father was a Greek. Now, when it says that he was a Greek, you know what that means? He was not a believer. He wasn't a believer. He wasn't a Jew. And that his mother's name was Eunice, and it appears that Timothy's father's not even around. So Eunice is a single mom. All right? And Paul takes notice of this young man, and the believers spoke well of Timothy, and they wanted to take him along, and so Paul circumcised him. Now, there's a couple clues in that passage that we read about what we know. That clue number one of what Timothy's life looked like was that his mom was a Jew, but his dad was a Greek, making it an unrecognized marriage. That Jews did not recognize that they were married. And number two, Timothy was not circumcised. Timothy had not been included in the covenant, aka Timothy was not considered to be a Jew. And you see, the Jewish people had a name for people like Timothy. And the name was Monzer. Children of illegitimate birth. In fact, history says that many called Jesus a Monzer because Joseph and Mary were not married when she became pregnant. That Jesus, it's there in your notes, M-A-N-Z-E-R. M-A-N-Z-E-R is the English translation. It's on the next page, but I'm sorry. Yeah. There we go. Here it is up on the screen. Timothy was a Monzer. The Bible says that his mother and grandmother were both believers in Jesus. They were both Jewish. Dad was a Greek. And as we think about Timothy and the culture of the day and what his story might look like, it might have been like this. Here was this young girl named Eunice. And she meets this Greek man, and man, he is good looking and he is charming, and she falls in love with him and she wants to marry him. And maybe Lois, tried to talk her out of it. You can't marry him. He's a pagan. You can't marry outside of the faith. But she was in love. Maybe she reasoned, well, you know what? He'll become a Jew. He'll convert. He'll become a convert and a believer. Maybe they even go to the rabbi, and she's like, and the rabbi's like, don't do this. Don't do this. Oh, but we love one another. We can have a good marriage, Rabbi. But Eunice, you don't understand what Torah says. You don't understand the law. See, in Deuteronomy 23, verse 2, it says that no one of illegitimate birth, no manzer, may enter the assembly of the Lord, may or any of his descendants, even to the 10th generation. But they got married anyway. And man, they start their life together, and they're living life together, and before long, here comes a little boy, and they name him Timothy. I can only imagine what happened on the 8th day. Eunice takes little Timothy, and she goes to the rabbi, and she says, Rabbi, I want you to circumcise my son. And he says, I can't do that. But I want to raise him a Jew. He can never be a Jew. But you don't understand. He's a manzer. You say, and you're just like, what does that mean? He can't be circumcised. He can't go to temple. He can't. Oh, but surely he can go to the court of the Gentiles. No. Not even there. He's a manzer. Surely he'll be able to go to the synagogue with us. Nope. He will not be able to go. He can go to school with the other kids. No. He will not be able to study with the other kids. But what did he do? He didn't do anything. Eunice, it's because of your sin that he's a manzer. Oh, Rabbi, maybe he could study with the rabbi at night. No. As a manzer, he cannot study Torah. Maybe someday he will marry. He can't marry anyone of the faith. He can only marry another manzer. You start to get a feel for what life must have been like for Timothy. Can you imagine the kids as they're going down the street taunting Timothy? Manzer, 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 you can't play with us. You can't come to our birthday party. You can't be like us because my mom says your mom was bad. Timothy was a social and religious outcast. 2 Timothy 3 says, you, however, Paul writing to Timothy, continue in the things that you have learned and become convinced of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from your childhood you have known the sacred writings, which you are able to give to you wisdom that leads to salvation through faith, which is in Christ Jesus. Paul says, from a young age, you learned the Scriptures. You studied the Torah. You knew what the Scriptures declared. How did he learn? Mom, grandma. It says they were believers, that they knew some of the Word. 2 Timothy verse 1 says, for I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. They just didn't know the Word. They had faith. A faith they passed on. But maybe it was more than just Eunice and Lois. Maybe Timothy sat outside the synagogue window and listened. Maybe Timothy hid in the bushes while the rabbi read scriptures publicly. Maybe that's why Paul tells Timothy, don't forsake the public reading of Scripture. Somehow this kid who was a manzer, who was ignored by society, who was shunned by the church, learned the text. It's an interesting question. What reasons do we have for not learning the text? Timothy, there was a hunger in this young man that everyone else cast away. How easy would it have been for Timothy to just give up? To pack it in. Everything's stacked against me. Everybody's against me. Culture's against me. The church is against me. I might as well just give up, but not Timothy. I can just see Timothy getting all excited when a new rabbi would come to town. Maybe the rabbi will let me follow him. Maybe the rabbi will teach me. Mom, I know the scriptures. Man, I know the text. I know it better than the other kids know it. Maybe I can follow the rabbi. Oh, Timothy, I wish that was true. I wish it was true, but no rabbi will let you study with him because of what I did. Not because of who you are, but because of what I've done. It's just not possible. Then one day Paul shows up in town. First missionary journey. And the people mistake him for a god, and Timothy's lurking in the shadows, and he hears Paul preaching. And Paul's preaching, in Christ Jesus, there is no Jew, there is no Greek, there is no slave. And Timothy starts to think, maybe that means there's no Monzer either. And as he watches the rabbi, they stone him and drag him out of town, only to get back up and come right back in town and teach again. Such boldness. If only I could be his disciple. Then 2 years go by and Paul comes back on his second missionary journey. And Paul is looking for disciples. And he notices this kid named Timothy, a kid with a fire in his soul, a kid that's not like the other kids. And he asked around, he said, what can you tell me about this young man? And all the believers spoke highly of him, how hardworking he was, and how heartbreaking his story was. Man, I would have loved to have been standing there when Paul said to Timothy, I want you to come follow me. I want you to be my disciple. I want you to be like me. As I become like Jesus, you become like me. Oh, but Paul, Rabbi, you don't understand. I'm a Monzer. I don't care who you are. It's who you're going to become that I care about. Can you imagine the scene at home? Because here comes Timothy. He's busting in the front door and he's running in the house like, Mom, Grandma. He said I could be like him. What? Who said that? Paul. He asked me to be his disciple. We're leaving in the morning. And suddenly the years of guilt and shame wash off a mother's heart. And the kid no one would give the time of day for, the kid who was ignored and shunned, no one would have chosen to be his disciple, begins to travel with Paul as his disciple, as a disciple of Jesus. Paul takes him under his wing as his spiritual son. Do you know where we next hear about Timothy? We hear about Timothy when Paul writes to him in 1 Timothy as the pastor of the church of Ephesus, the largest church in Asia Minor. And Timothy's probably only 22 or 23. He'd spent 5 to 7 years with Paul, meaning that Timothy was 14 or 15 when he began to follow, when he went with Paul. And Paul's raising up a spiritual son. And that letter starts this way. It says, to Timothy, my true son, my dearest son. And he encourages him not to let anyone despise him because of his youth. Timothy was a Monzer, a throwaway, a nobody. And yet in Christ Jesus, he learned the text. He lived the text. He taught the text. He prayed the text. He died the text. Timothy became the text. Timothy became like Jesus. Every believer is fully capable. When the enemy begins to cause you to doubt, when the enemy begins to speak into you and say, you can't get to the next level, you're not discipleship material, you can't be like Jesus, remember that it doesn't matter where we started. It doesn't matter where we are. It only matters is where we're headed. Amen? Amen.